At home, we simultaneously received flower viewing invitations from the Noble Consort and the Squire. My elder sister snatched up the invite from the Noble Consort and tossed the Squire's invitation to me. "Sister, do you think a concubine's daughter like you can go to the palace? You'll only embarrass our Viscount Manor." My elder sister went to the palace joyfully, but ended up being chased by the crown prince with a whip and ended up falling into the water. A guard fished her out, leading to physical contact, making it hard for her to marry. She had to marry that greedy and lustful guard, enduring endless suffering. I, on the other hand, caught the eye of the squire's son. He later became the top scholar and rose to be a prime minister, and I became a first-rank noble lady, enjoying endless honors. But during my nephew's 100-day banquet, my elder sister killed me. Reborn, my elder sister once again snatched the squire's invitation. "Sister, this time it's my turn to be the noble lady with all the honors. You go to hell." But she didn't know, the squire's son was gravely ill. Ding! RoyalStory reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The legal mother put the two invitations on the desk, signaling my elder sister to take the one from the noble consort on the left. But my elder sister snatched the squire's invitation on the right, throwing the one on the left to me as if it burned her hands. The legal mother frowned and lightly scolded. "Jingshi, did you look carefully?" My elder sister pulled the legal mother's hand in her usual coquettish manner. "Mother, the palace banquets are boring after so many times. Sister has never been, let her get some experience to avoid embarrassing our Viscount Manor in the future." I suppressed a cold laugh. In my past life, she didn't say that. My elder sister Gu Jingshi had always looked down on me, a concubine's daughter, since childhood. After coming of age, her most frequently spoken words were, "I was born to be a superior, while you are only fit to languish in the gutters." Spring is the best season for families to seek marriage alliances for their daughters. When the invitations arrived from the noble consort and the squire, she chose the noble consorts without hesitation. After all, there were many nobles in the palace. Even if she didn't catch the crown prince's eye, Gu Jingshi's appearance and talents would still attract powerful families. Becoming the main wife of a high family was merely her second choice. But fate is unpredictable. She aimed for the crown prince and saw his noble face. However, the crown prince was a mischievous person, deriving pleasure from mocking others. Gu Jingshi's ambitions were evident, and she could not escape. Chased around by the crown prince's whip, she eventually fell into the water, watched by the onlookers who dared not intervene due to the crown prince's tyranny. She was retrieved from the water by a guard, with her clothes clinging to her and showing her exquisite figure. Her reputation was ruined. No one would marry her, so she had to marry the guard who saved her, who turned out to be a lustful man, marrying many concubines, eventually aborting Gu Jingshi's child. She could no longer bear children, living like a stray dog. While I caught the eye of the squire's son, married into the affluent North Gardens. My husband studied hard for 3 years and excelled to be the top scholar, rising to a prime minister, and I became a noble lady. Gu Jingshi hated me to the bone and killed me. Now, reborn, she eagerly snatched the squire's invitation again. Provocatively looking at me, she whispered in my ear, "Sister, this time I become the noble lady, and you rot in hell." The day of the banquet, Gu Jingshi specially sent me new clothes, the latest style in the capital. Light green silk, adorned with a peony in bloom under the sun, a golden gauze hem, and a sheer outer garment like cicada wings. The attire was excellent, yet the silk was fit for summer, very refreshing. Smiling, I accepted. "Thank you, sister." Legal mother had prepared 2 carriages. It was clear at a glance that Gu Jingshi's was more luxurious. I said nothing, smiling lightly. Father, a deputy minister of finance, loved gold and jade, but being too flashy is not good. The squire's family, already wealthy, valued our status. To nobles, merchants are despised, mere tools. I wish my sister good luck. Every step I took into the palace was firm and steady, a place so grand that buried countless beautiful women, and I would not be next. I sat at the banquet, at the near end, behaving prudently, trying to blend in, hoping to avoid disaster. Fate seemed predestined. Merely admiring a blooming peony caught the eye of the malicious Crown Prince Chimayan, seeing me as a scheming woman. "With your looks, you also dream of peonies? Let me add some color for you, maybe my father will notice you." His whip scraped the ground towards me, his words as fierce as a beast's roar. Petite, I ran, dodging several strikes, but eventually, one hit my back. The onlookers laughed behind handkerchiefs, contemptuous glances, pointing, finding amusement in my distress, watching how I would beg the crown prince for mercy. This chance meeting lost and left in disarray, yet I was not resigned. Women were mere playthings to them? Today was my turn. Who next? Pain and humiliation raged in my mind. If destined for disgrace, why not indulge in a moment's pride? Even the Viscount Manor was another abyss for me. I stood up and looked back at the crown prince, who had a smug expression on his face. With a thud, I knelt down in front of him. Please, your highness, have mercy. Mayan walked over, spinning the whip in his hand. He bent down and snorted, lick the dirt off my boots clean, and I'll spare you. Noble Consort wanted to speak but swallowed her words under the crown prince's fierce gaze. Mayan was the son of the late empress, of noble status. The current emperor had a deep affection for the empress, and Mayan was made a crown prince at the age of 3. After the empress passed away, the emperor indulged him greatly, shaping his arrogant nature. With his maternal family holding substantial military power, his position was unshakable, and no one dared to provoke him. I raised my head and smiled faintly. This humble girl obeys your command. Everyone watched me slowly bow my head and lower my arms, and soft laughter echoed from above. I didn't mind, only lowering my head further and further. A smile tugged at the corner of my mouth as I suddenly lifted my head and slammed it into Mayan's forehead, then stood up quickly and snatched his whip. Amidst the gasps of astonishment around me, I fiercely lashed the whip at Mayan. I clearly heard the sound of his outer garment tearing, and a long whip mark appeared on his left shoulder. In just a moment, I was subdued by the guards and pressed to the ground, yet I still defiantly stared at Mayan with unyielding eyes. Noble Consort shouted angrily, "How dare you injure the crown prince? Somebody, drag her out and beat her to death with sticks." Mayan's large hand clamped my jaw, the force seemingly about to crush me, his piercing gaze striking to my core. I felt panicked and mostly afraid, but I couldn't reveal a hint of it because my life was at stake. He didn't let go, and no one dared to approach. Time slipped by second, sweat beaded on my palms as they began to tremble. Suddenly, Mayan flung me to the ground and glanced at Noble Consort. "I didn't know, Noble Consort, that you could dictate to me?" Noble Consort was momentarily at a loss, stammering, "Your Highness has your own decision." I spoke out of turn. Mayan swept his gaze over the crowd, and it felt as if a cold wind blew through the spring day. It was just some playful banter with Miss Gu. "What's all the fuss about? If I hear a word of today's events, this won't be a flower banquet, but an opportunity to taste my new brew." Everyone knew that Mayan loved brewing wine, but all his wine was poisoned. The crowd dispersed, and Mayan looked at my little face, sneering, "What do you think I should do to punish you?" When I returned home dazedly, Gu Jingshi had long been waiting. Seeing her spirited look, I felt little emotion inside. She patted my back and smiled even brighter. "Sister, how does the crown prince's whip taste? The weather is nice today, your clothes will dry quickly, and you'll still smell that wild grass by the lake." She didn't know that I hadn't fallen into the water and thought that from today on, I would lose my reputation just like her. Zhou Wuji is truly talented. He even wrote a poem for me today, praising my beautiful dress. He's so well-read and courteous. He blushed after complimenting me. But alas, sister, you probably won't have such luck to witness it. Who knows what romantic affairs will be rumored tomorrow. Oh, by the way, Wuji will soon come to propose marriage. As I passed her by, I whispered in her ear, "Sister, Zhou Wuji is not only talented in poetry but also exceptional in other areas." However what? Nothing, sister. Just early congratulations on your engagement. She suddenly slapped me across the face. Say one more bad word about Wuji and see if I don't tear your mouth apart. The rumors she expected did not spread, the capital remained as calm as a still lake. Gu Jingshi tried to inquire about the palace but found out nothing. I had no talent for poetry since childhood, having only read a few days of women's teachings and etiquette. Instead, I knew a lot about the wild history and strange stories of past dynasties and was quite good at climbing walls and trees. Father scolded me for being unruly, while my legitimate mother found me vulgar. Only my birth mother tolerated me, smiling and calling me a carefree girl who should live freely, even if it meant being punished by my legitimate mother. Before she died, she held my hand, Jinghui, never be too stubborn. Staying alive is the most important thing. But in this world, women have it hard. Only by fighting can one survive. That's why I took a gamble, knowing that no one had ever dared disobey the crown prince's will, and I struck with that whip. Thankfully, I won that bet. But I never expected the crown prince to truly let me go. A few days later, he sent someone to summon me to the palace. Even though I was mentally prepared for revenge, my legs still weakened when I saw the snake pit. Dozens of venomous snakes crawled on the ground, their gaping mouths awaiting their prey. And I was their meal for the day. If you can come out alive, I'll forgive you and reward you generously. Qi Mayan leisurely watched me without a shred of pity for human life. I clenched my fist. Instead of being pushed into the snake pit, it was better to act on my own. I pulled out Qi Mayan's sword and jumped into the pit. All I could hear were the sounds of flesh ripping and the hissing roars of the snakes. Half an hour later, I lay exhausted in the snake pit, covered in blood, surrounded by snakes, a ghastly sight. When I woke up again, I was already back at the Viscount Manor. The next day, an imperial decree came from the palace, appointing me as the crown prince's concubine, with an entrance into the eastern palace after a month. Father was overjoyed, while my legal mother's resentful and venomous gaze never wavered. And Gu Jingxi's expression was even more intriguing, first shocked, then scrutinizing, and finally pitying. Even if you've hooked the crown prince, what difference does it make? Remember, the last crown prince's concubine only lived for about a month. You must take good care of yourself and not die too soon. It'd be a pity if I couldn't see the emperor appoint me as an official lady. I smiled faintly and turned away. I would live long, for this decree was something I'd fought hard for. Gu Jingxi had gone to great lengths to make sure I saw her happiness sooner, even arranging to marry on the same day as me. She was the legitimate daughter of the Viscount Manor, naturally with a lavish dowry. While I was merely seen by father as a pawn to cling to the Eastern Palace, clearly showing our disparity. On the day of the marriage, I entered the Eastern Palace through the side gate in a small sedan. While Gu Jingxi, dressed in a red gown, was personally welcomed by Zhou Wuji with an 8-carriage sedan into the home of the Squire. In the flickering candlelight, Qi Mayan's gloomy eyes stared at me for a long time before he spoke faintly. Why don't you ask why I'm marrying you? I'm unworthy and untalented, coarse and ignorant. It's my good fortune to catch the crown prince's eye. But I guess the deep palace is too boring, and there are few who can catch your highness's fancy. I suppose I'm one of them. Qi Mayan didn't reply, blowing out the red candle and rolling into the bed with me. My birth mother was once a courtesan from Y City, skilled in serving men, and I inherited her expertise. Not only could I wield a knife to slay a snake, but I also had countless tricks to entertain in the bedroom, making Qi Mayan spend half a month each month with me. Now and then, we'd play some new games, using eunuchs as targets or stripping palace maids for painting. Qi Mayan and I always found joy together, laughing as we let arrows fly. Even though they never landed on the apple atop the eunuch's head, often hitting legs or grazing their faces instead. When Qi Mayan was happy, I was happier. To tame a pervert, one must be more perverted than him. But Qi Mayan wasn't merely a pervert, that was just a facade. His inner ruthlessness was something I dared not lightly provoke. Gu Jingxi came to the Eastern Palace to see me, her slightly pale complexion well covered by makeup, though her clothes were still too tightly worn. How are you in the Eastern Palace, sister? There are rumors outside that you've been harming lives and being overly spoiled to curry favor with the crown prince, and the crown princess slapped you. I fiddled with the rouge on my hand, signaling to a maid beside me. The maid slapped Gu Jingxi across the face. How dare you not kneel before the crown prince's concubine? A commoner like you dares to speak so casually. This slap is a reward from the crown prince's concubine. No wonder she was my well-trained maid. Yuan's strength was unmatched. Gu Jinghui, I am your legitimate sister, and you actually. I looked down at the slap mark on Gu Jingxi's face and sneered. Gu Jingxi, you are now a commoner. Wait until your husband becomes a high official before you compare legitimate and illegitimate. I just don't know if Gu Jingxi will live until then. She was right. I was spoiled and vain, and the crown princess slapped me, but so what? Men always need to balance their affections properly. Moreover, I knew Qi Mayan wasn't as simple as he appeared. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sat securely as the crown prince for over 10 years. If I wasn't given the cold shoulder occasionally, how could I avoid the hidden hands within this deep palace? In just a few days, the empress gifted 2 concubines to the crown prince. Those 2 had bright eyes and lovely smiles, naturally alluring, just the kind Qi Mayan liked. He lingered with them for days, and the eastern palace frequently echoed with flirtatious laughter. Meanwhile, the front lines were tense, and the crown prince was indulging in pleasures, earning a severe scolding from his majesty. The second prince volunteered to go to the front lines, but he was just for show, incapable and useless. Seeing another city fall to the enemy, his majesty was worried sick and bedridden. At night, I brought ginseng soup to the crown prince's study, but his new favored concubine stopped me at the door. His Highness is busy. Concubine Gu, you shouldn't disturb him. Angering His Highness might earn you a scolding. I'll serve here, no need to trouble you. She tried to grab the food box from my hand, so I kicked her to the ground, causing her to cry out in pain. I simply smoothed my dress, feeling a bit rusty after not practicing for days. I entered the study, placed the ginseng soup to the side, and pushed a paper in front of Qi Mayan. He glanced at me, his eyes filled with obscure emotions. I said nothing, returning to my courtyard indifferently. The next day, Qi Mayan had a long private talk with His Majesty. His Majesty ordered reinforcement troops and presented strategies for deployment, yet the war remained grim. The enemy advanced like a tidal wave, seemingly unstoppable. Finally, the crown prince led troops to the battlefield, first beheading the general to raise their spirits. In just a month, the army triumphed, and the second prince, disheveled and filthy, was captured. It turned out the second prince had colluded with the enemy general, revealing defensive plans in exchange for being elevated to the throne, but the crown prince saw through it. The second prince was executed, his mother imprisoned. His Majesty, already gravely ill, succumbed to grief and passed away. Qi Mayan became the new emperor, promoting me to Noble Consort, treating me with more favor than ever before. And Zhou Wuji passed the imperial examination this year, making my legitimate elder sister finally an official's wife as she wished. A spy planted in the Zhou family reported that Gu Jingxi nearly wrecked the Zhou household. When I was made Noble Consort, muttering, "Why hasn't she died yet? Why won't she die?" At the banquet, seeing the slightly thin face of Gu Jingxi, the smile in my eyes grew even more intense. I raised my wine glass and looked at Qi Mayan. "Your Majesty, the top scholar has done great service for the country and is also my sister's husband. Now that he has done a good job, what reward should your Majesty grant him? Otherwise, I might get angry. Then I will grant the 2 concubines from my eastern palace to my dear Minister Zhou, to spare your sister from exhaustion." Qi Mayan, who shares my bed and pillow, always says things that are to my liking. Zhou Wuji, wiping his sweat, stood up to thank for the favor, while Gu Jingxi's face was extremely beautiful, like the rosy clouds of today. In the imperial garden, she blocked my way, and I dismissed the attendants. After not seeing her for so long, I missed this elder sister very much. "Gu Jinghui, you are already a noble consort, what more could be unsatisfactory? Why can't you let me go?" "Sister, I don't understand what you mean." "That concubines are a grant from His Majesty. If you're unwilling, you can go to His Majesty. Don't use His Majesty to pressure me. You have long known about Zhou Wuji's private affair. Why didn't you tell me?" I held a handkerchief and restrained my smile, but still laughed out loud. "Sister, this is what you asked for. How could I ruin your good marriage? Zhou Wuji, nowadays, you should cherish your blessed life with 2 wives. Gu Jingxi, you will never get the title of a noble lady in this life." Qi Mayan took new beauties into the palace after his coronation. Yuan comforted me to be at ease, but how could I be at ease when I never invested my heart? After all, none of them could surpass me, so there was no need to worry. Strangely, Despite being a dissipated person, Qi Mayan has never had any offspring in the harem. Even back in the Eastern Palace, I couldn't help but think more about it, because I needed more support. Starting from the details, since I entered the Eastern Palace, I began to scrutinize and connect it to the new beauty's daily life, finally making a bold conjecture. I took the bracelet from the box and gave it to Yuan, asking her to show it to a folk doctor outside the palace, and she returned to the palace in a panic. Noble Consort, these beads are soaked in a considerable amount of musk. If worn often, it would be hard to conceive. Fortunately, I kept it in the box, but after a long time, it got contaminated with the scent. I buried the beads and started drinking medicinal soup to regulate my health. In spring, I accompanied Qi Mayan hunting. He made me a fox fur collar from the fox we hunted. In summer, we filled the room with ice, tiring the palace servants who ran under the scorching sun. In autumn, he let me, this poorly educated concubine of his grade, the top 3 of the final imperial examination. In winter, I wanted to soak in a hot spring, and Qi Mayan dispatched 3,000 craftsmen to bring me hot water. Former officials called me a bewitching consort, palace servants avoided me like a snake or scorpion, but this was the shackle Qi Mayan gave me. He could pamper and indulge me, or push me out as bait. Removing those disgruntled old ministers one by one. In my past life, I pursued fame and power, expending all my efforts to elevate Zhou Wuji to the position of prime minister, only to gain an empty title, while the inside was in shambles. In this life, the only thing that can protect me is power. I exhausted all my energies to cater to Qi Mayan, offering him advice from the harem to the front court. He asked where these ingenious strategies came from. I only said they came from storybooks, mere fictitious anecdotes. He didn't know that my past life's experiences lingered in my mind. How could I not have such handy insights? One day, as I was dining with Qi Mayan, smelling the fragrant leg of mutton made me feel nauseous, causing my brow to knit. As I wanted to stand up, I directly fainted. Qi Mayan hurriedly said, "Quick, summon the imperial doctor." I was pregnant, over a month along. Qi Mayan was delighted and rewarded everyone in the palace accordingly. His gaze softened significantly. "Jinghui, we have a child now. This is my first child since ascending the throne. If it's a boy, he will be the eldest prince. I will grant amnesty to the world for his sake." I restrained my smile lightly. "What if it's a girl? Does your majesty not like her?" "Nonsense, I love them all." The news of my pregnancy spread quickly. The first to visit me was the empress. She stared at my belly with a complex look, then suddenly smiled kindly, holding my hand. "Sister, you must take good care of yourself to give birth to a dragon heir for his majesty." I had the things she sent thoroughly inspected by the imperial doctor. Now, I am the most favored person by his majesty in this palace. No one dares to disobey my words. But many also want me dead. I took a sedan chair to leave the empress's palace after paying my respects. The scorching sun glaringly reflected on the ground, creating swirl patterns. Yuan hurried the footmen. "Her ladyship can't stand the heat. Be careful, or you'll be punished." The footmen repeatedly acknowledged while moving ahead. Suddenly, one at the front slipped and fell, and I tumbled out of the sedan, just about to hit the hard ground when a silhouette flashed by, shielding me and taking the fall herself. In the ensuing chaos, people helped me up, and it turned out it was concubine Li, who had entered the palace last year. Yuan loudly rebuked, "You scoundrels, what are you waiting for? Summon the imperial doctor quick." I had a miscarriage scare but was fortunately unharmed. Facing concubine Li, she remained indifferent. "Aren't you afraid of me? If there's any mishap with this child, even if you saved me, you wouldn't escape responsibility. Innocent children are blameless." I had no other thoughts. I had the falling footmen punished with 50 lashes and ordered people to thoroughly inspect the path back to the palace, discovering oil on a few loose cobblestones. As expected, she acted. But I am still waiting for a chance to strike fatally. I invited concubine Li to sit with me in my palace. Most of the time, she would politely refuse, citing illness, but she would secretly send me storybooks that I liked. Yuan was indignant that concubine Li is really too arrogant, daring to refuse even the noble consort's invitation. "She's not arrogant, she just doesn't want to run into his majesty." Concubine Li, originally the legitimate daughter of the Marquis Li's household, had been practicing martial arts since childhood. Though she was a woman, she had the ambition of a man. However, her status ultimately confined her. No one knew that she and I were close friends. When we were young, we used to climb walls together, almost falling down once, and it was she who caught me with a flick of her red ribbon. We had once gotten drunk together at a street corner and waded through a small river in spring, soaking our shoes and socks. When I was bullied by my legitimate elder sister, she would send me medicine. When my birth mother was critically ill, and my legitimate mother found her unlucky and refused to call a doctor, I soaked myself in water to hold my birth mother and lower her fever, over and over. In the end, it was Concubine Li who secretly bribed a doctor to treat her. Though my birth mother passed away, Concubine Li was the best person to me in this world. Entering the palace was not her wish but a burden due to her family's status. She yearned for her childhood sweetheart. I dared not get too close to her, fearing I would bring her harm. Yet, in the end, I dragged her into this whirlpool. Qi Mayan, upon learning that Concubine Li had saved me, favored her exclusively for 3 days. That day, I passed by her palace and took just a quick glance at her. She was holding a jade pendant, looking into the distance. Beyond the palace walls, there must be her longing for freedom. At 6 months pregnant, I was increasingly prone to sleep and laziness. Yuan called me for a long time before I woke up. "Your Highness, Concubine Li is in trouble." Startled, I hastily put on an outer robe and rushed to the palace of Empress. Concubine Li knelt in front of the hall, her face swollen and red. Qi Mayan and the Empress sat high above, their faces sullen and frightening. The Empress sternly said, "Concubine Li, your personal maid Lan has confessed. You drank contraceptive medicine after serving the Emperor and had an affair with a man outside the palace. These jade pendants and medicine residues are the evidence. What else have you to say?" Concubine Li sorrowfully raised her head and said, "I have done nothing to betray His Majesty." "And who sent you this letter? Name the man, and perhaps I can spare your life." "I have not exchanged letters with anyone." With a bang, Qi Mayan smashed a teacup to the ground. As an emperor, nothing is more intolerable than a disloyal concubine. This was a slap in his face. "Empress, deal with it according to palace rules." "I obey." Concubine Li's lewd behavior in the harem is punishable by death. "She should be." "Wait!" I quickly stepped forward, clutching the handkerchief in my hand tighter and tighter. "Your Majesty, Concubine Li is the daughter of a meritorious family. Her father and brothers are still defending the borders. If she is rashly executed, it may dishearten the loyal ministers. I don't believe she would do anything to betray your Majesty. Everything can still be investigated." The Empress was clearly determined to put Concubine Li to death. She read the letter aloud in front of everyone. Although it wasn't indecent, it was indeed full of tender words exchanged between a man and a woman. Qi Mayan shouted, "Enough. From today onward, Concubine Li is stripped of her title and confined to the cold palace." I wanted to plead further but was forced back by Qi Mayan's icy stare. In the cold palace, there are only mad women and concubines like Concubine Li who have been demoted. They eat and wear the worst. Afraid she wouldn't survive, I sent Yuan to deliver some food. Soon, Yuan returned with a tearful face. "Your Highness, our things couldn't be delivered." The eunuch at the door said it was by the Empress's order. Concubine Li's crime was grave, and even if she starved to death, it would be well-deserved. With a crash, the teacup shattered in my hand, blood trickling down without feeling the pain. Qi Mayan had long forgotten about Concubine Li, indulging daily in pleasures with beauties. Recently, he even set his eyes on the 13-year-old daughter of a minister, intending to bring her into the palace. Ignoring the minister's advice, he brought the girl in. But within a few days, she was carried out by 2 eunuchs, wrapped in blood-soaked white cloth, clutching a peace amulet her mother had given her. The harem, this man-eating place, once you enter, there's only death as a way out. No amount of peace amulets can help. Old courtiers protested with their lives, and the commoners complained incessantly, but Qi Mayan turned a deaf ear, continuing his perverse pleasures. As my due date approached, my palace was surrounded like an iron barrel. I refused all visitors, but it still wasn't enough. At night, there was a commotion in the palace of the Empress. Qi Mayan, pulled from the embrace of warm, fragrant beauties, was full of irritation. Upon seeing him, the Empress threw herself into his arms. "Your Majesty, there are ghosts, ghosts, listen, there are so many babies crying. They are here. And one dressed in red on my bed, trying to strangle me." Qi Mayan pushed the Empress away sternly. "Empress, you've lost your mind. There are no ghosts. There are, really. Take care of the Empress, and stop bothering me." For several days thereafter, the Empress was awakened nightly by the crying of babies. Terrified, she dared not sleep, increasing the number of palace maids on night watch from 2 to 4. The palace brought in Taoist priests to perform rites to exorcise the ghosts, supposedly to appease the spirits. However, these spirits only tormented the Empress, filling the palace with rumors that she had harmed too many children. It was then that I went into labor. My belly contracted painfully. Because it was Qi Mayan's first child, imperial doctors and midwives had long been prepared. When it was finally time to give birth, the pain was so unbearable that I almost fainted. The cries of agony lasted for an entire day and night. It wasn't until the final scream of exhaustion had escaped that I finally gave birth to my child, a boy, just as I had hoped for. As I propped myself up to look at the child in Qi Mayan's arms, Qi Mayan immediately named him Qi Shaohan. We were immersed in deep joy when a eunuch hurriedly reported, "Concubine Li has died suddenly in the cold palace." Qi Mayan kicked the eunuch and irritably said, "Dead means dead. Such ill tidings on a joyous day." The smile on my face froze, and a sharp pain rose in my heart. My arm could no longer support me as I collapsed. When I opened my eyes again, only Yuan was by my bedside. "Your Highness, you've awakened? The first prince has been taken to the wet nurse for feeding. Would you like to see him?" I shook my head. With difficulty, I spoke, concubinely. Tears immediately welled up in my eyes, and my nose stung painfully. "Your Highness, please calm yourself. You mustn't cry during confinement. Concubine Li has already passed. She wouldn't want to see you like this." "Who did this to her?" "I bribed a eunuch in the cold palace. He said he saw the Empress leaving the cold palace at night. It was her again." I lay on the bed, staring blankly at the canopy, and laughed suddenly. "Concubine Li, take your time. There will always be someone to accompany you on your journey." During my confinement, I followed the old nurse's advice and forced myself to eat and rest well, recovering quickly. Gu Jingxi sent a message to enter the palace to see me, but I had Yuan refuse her. She hated me deeply, and with the child being so young, I dared not let her in. However, I heard Zhou Wuji was exceptionally good to her. The two of them would toss and turn until dawn, their moans echoing throughout the Zhou household. Everyone in the capital now praised Gu Jingxi for her tactics. She could enjoy it. No matter what, it was all in vain. Soon it was time for the first prince's one-month banquet, and Qi Mayan ordered the Ministry of Rites to organize it grandly. The entire palace was filled with joy because of the first prince, and I donned the ceremonial attire of a noble consort. My exquisite makeup reflected in the mirror, drawing praise for my beauty from everyone. I gently touched my face in the mirror. Beautiful as it was, the pure goodness of a young girl was long gone. At the palace banquet, I saw Gu Jingxi, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. She looked pale and much thinner, her eyes filled with growing resentment as she stared at me. Gu Jingxi walked toward me, exuding a sickly allure with each step. Her snake-like waist swayed deliberately, her eyes glancing at Qi Mayan on the dragon throne. Recently, Qi Mayan had taken a liking to the wives of officials, having seized several into the palace. Tired of them, he either tormented them or threw them out, leaving court officials trembling in fear that he would set his sights on their wives and concubines. Yet there were always those who eagerly sought his favor. Unfortunately for her, Qi Mayan's eyes did not respond to Gu Jingxi's seduction, but instead grew more mesmerized by the dancers in the hall, whom I had specially trained for him. "Your Highness, congratulations on the birth of the first prince. I toast to you and hope you will continue to support our family." After saying this, Gu Jingxi downed her drink in one gulp, her eyes not leaving my wine cup for a second. Your Highness, won't you drink? Are you still angry about the unkind things I said before? Today I apologize to you. We are family, and we should stay close. I smiled slightly, warmth lingering in my eyes. You're right, sister. How could I not drink? Seeing me drink from the cup, Gu Jingxi swayed her snake-like waist back to her seat. I walked toward the Empress and personally poured her a cup of wine. The Empress nodded slightly and drank it in one go. I felt tipsy and a bit dizzy, so I took Yuan with me to the Imperial Garden to sober up. We had just walked halfway when I heard a muffled groan from Yuan behind me. Immediately, a strange man tightly wrapped his arms around my waist, dragging me toward the shadows. In front of the dilapidated glazed palace, candlelight illuminated half the sky, and sleazy sounds echoed from inside. The younger palace maids were already blushing. Qi Mayan strode in angrily, fury exuding from him. I will kill her. Just then, Gu Jingxi knelt on the ground with a thud, trembling like a sieve. Your Majesty, please have mercy. The noble consort was momentarily bewitched by a scoundrel and asked me to cover for her. She knows her mistake. Please, for the first prince's sake, forgive her this once. The noble consort said she only wanted to try it once. There won't be a next time. Qi Mayan kicked Gu Jingxi hard. Get out, I will tear her to pieces. With that, he ordered the guards to break down the palace door. A familiar voice rang out behind us. Your Majesty, how did I not know my sister could spin such a convincing tale? It's a pity she doesn't become a storyteller. Everyone turned to see me, shocked. Then who was inside? Qi Mayan shouted fiercely, arrest this venomous woman. Gu Jingxi looked at me, eyes filled with shock and terror, trying to scream but was gagged with a cloth. The palace door was broken open, and everyone rushed inside, the sight before them even more scandalous than a brothel. Torn clothes were scattered on the ground, from the door to the bed. They truly were in a hurry. Seeing the two bodies intertwined on the bed, everyone gasped. The only sound was heavy breathing. The woman was none other than the Empress. And the man was a palace guard, who in a previous life was Gu Jingxi's lecherous husband. I never imagined Gu Jingxi would bring him in again this life, intending to use him to ruin my reputation and sever my path. But alas, this time she'd be disappointed. The Empress was dethroned and sent into the coal palace, where she screamed daily, demanding to see His Majesty, claiming her innocence. But Qi Mayan had always been a cold-hearted person. After witnessing such indecent behavior, it was only because of the influence of her maternal family that he had not ordered her immediate execution. I became the true power in the harem, holding the only prince in my hand and commanding significant respect. The winds in the harem now all blew towards my palace. Half a month later, I went to see the Empress. Her clothes were tattered, her body emitted a foul odor, and below her writhing form, fresh blood trickled. Each day she was given medicine that maintained her life, leaving her unable to die or truly live. When she saw me, her consciousness cleared somewhat. Wretch, it's you. You did this to me. I didn't hide my disgust and moved closer to her, suppressing my nausea. Yes, esteemed Empress, it was me. That wine was laced with aphrodisiacs, and since you hadn't served the Emperor for months, you must have missed a man's touch. I merely helped fulfill your desire. Why? Why did you harm me? I didn't answer her. I suddenly tightened a rope around her neck, tightening it bit by bit until the final seconds of her life. I whispered, did you think about today when you strangled concubinely? This is what you owe her. I sent someone to report the Empress's death. Qi Mayan dismissed the eunuch with a wave and continued to discuss the path to immortality with the national preceptor. This national preceptor was a Taoist priest the Empress had previously invited to exorcise ghosts. Skilled in Taoist magic and knowledgeable about reincarnation and longevity, Qi Mayan had appointed him as the national preceptor. Now, he rarely managed state affairs, leaving memorials piled up in my palace. I read them by lamplight, and the books I once disliked now became my daily readings. When floods erupted in the south, I dispatched a minister skilled in constructing channels to manage the water. When border conflicts arose, I appointed veteran generals and selected willing young men from noble families to go along. After all, it was the responsibility of the younger generation to uphold the country. As the imperial examinations approached, Zhou Wuji, having embezzled funds and accepted bribes, was executed as a warning to others. No one could block the path of promising scholars from humble backgrounds into officialdom. Initially, the court officials were unhappy with a woman handling state affairs, petitioning Qi Mayan for my execution, claiming I was destroying the nation. But gradually, they stopped complaining. All my actions were for the country, without the slightest selfish intent, and Qi Mayan grew increasingly dependent on me. He believed he could control everything and reclaim my powers at any time. But he didn't know, by building the immortal pavilion and executing loyal ministers who advised against it, his pursuit of immortality had long incited public outrage. Year after year, Gu Jingxi was tortured in prison, no longer resembling a human being. Curled up in a corner, her face was pallid, replaced by bloodstains. The slow-acting poison she drank daily permeated her heart and lungs inch by inch, intensifying her pain, but it wouldn't take her life. Gu Jingxi feared death. Even though she suffered, she would never commit suicide. I couldn't bear to let her die easily. After all, we were sisters by blood. I wanted her to see that while she chose a ruinous path in a previous life, I thrived in glory and honor. Qi Mayan's health deteriorated, only alleviated slightly by taking elixirs. Yet he continued to indulge in pleasures, his already emaciated body on the brink of collapse. I sat by his side, feeding him the last pill. He grasped my hand tightly, seemingly rejuvenated. With his muddled eyes opening slowly, he asked me, "Jinghui, are you truly devoted to me?" I brushed his hand aside and chuckled softly. "Your Majesty, you are deluded. No one has ever truly cared for you, just as you've never sincerely cared for anyone. Women, in your eyes, are mere playthings. I will dethrone you." He spat out blood after speaking. I pulled the quilt over him gently and said, "Your Majesty, it's too late. Let our son guard this prosperous nation for you." Qi Mayan died, and the eldest prince ascended the throne, honoring me as the Empress Dowager. As I looked at the majestic palace walls, I finally fulfilled my birth mother's wish and could live freely and recklessly. It was time to meet an old acquaintance. The heavy iron door opened, and the person inside was almost unrecognizable at first glance. Was this really my proud, dismissive elder sister? She had become so thin, only her sunken eyes remained prominent on her face. Seeing my magnificent attire, she slowly crawled over. I placed the food box in front of her. Today's meal would probably be the best she'd had in a long time. "Sister, you wouldn't know, but I am now the Empress Dowager." She looked into my eyes, no longer with malice, but more confusion. No, I clearly made the right choice this time. I was meant to be an imperial madam and you were supposed to die in suffering. Why? Gu Jingxi wept softly, then suddenly looked at me in anger. "It's you ruined me. Sister, there was never a predestined life. You chose that tyrant Zhou Wuji yourself, then feared a concubine would give birth before you. So you tried to control him using the status of a minister's legitimate daughter. How could he not hate you? No path is easy, but I succeeded because I've always trusted and relied only on myself. Now that you see my radiant success, it's time for you to depart." As I left the cell, the sunlight embraced me warmly. I moved concubine Li's grave to the foot of the temple, where she could gaze at her beloved monk daily. In the spring flowers and autumn moon, filled with thoughts of the past. After her death, the man she loved became a monk, each holding a jade pendant, ending their past fate. "Your Highness, look, it's snowing." I looked up, seeing a vast expanse of white. Having traversed the world, with all mountains covered in snow, the world was warm and peaceful.